Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to this afternoon's webinar. My name is Candace Williams, and I'm the Director of Policy Research and Strategic Initiatives at the New England Board of Higher Education. Today, we're conducting the fifth of 6 state-based presentations focused on our recent initiative, Upskilling New England, Bridging the Gap Between Educators and Employers. And today we'll share data and findings about Connecticut. I'm joined by Charlotte Pizer, Senior Policy and Research Analyst at the New England Board of Higher Education, as well as Vicki Bizzuto, the Director of Career and Transfer Readiness at the Connecticut State Colleges and Universities System, Jennifer Regan-Lefebvre, Faculty Director of Innovation Initiatives for Infosys at Trinity College, and Mark Scheinberg, President of Goodwin University. Before we jump in, I'll just say a quick few words about the New England Board of Higher Education, or NEBI as we call it. NEBI works to support the 6 New England states to address common challenges and bring action to shared opportunities in higher education and workforce development. In mid-2019, we launched Upskilling New England with support from Strata Education Network, and we convened stakeholders from across the region to identify the need for upskilling and challenges related to implementing these programs, to reveal best practices in developing and delivering programs and partnerships, and bolster efforts with recommendations for state policy. We'll share our findings through this webinar with a focus on Connecticut, but you can also find webinars focused on the other New England states on our website. And please feel free to pop any of your questions into the Q&A box, and we will also be sure to share slides after the presentation with you all. So the white paper on which this webinar is based was largely authored prior to the onset of COVID-19. And while the implications we'll share today have always been significant, we believe that they are even more important now than ever. Among our discoveries, we noted that populations most in need of upskilling are the least likely to receive those opportunities. And the economic shock caused by the spread of coronavirus has only accelerated the vulnerabilities of these individuals, most notably un- and underemployed, low-wage, and hourly workers throughout the country and New England. According to Strata's regular public viewpoint survey, less than half of Americans have access to the training that they would like to receive. We still don't know the full impact that the pandemic will have on our lives and economy. And we also don't know yet how our state and federal governments will respond fully in terms of financial support for education and training providers or policies on job creation. But if we use the Great Recession as a barometer, we can estimate that post-secondary education institutions, especially community colleges, will likely bear much of the weight for preparing individuals to go back to work and fill new types of jobs. In New England, unemployment rates peaked at an average of 9% in 2010, and colleges experienced up to an 8% increase in enrollment, community colleges. Notably, this period also represented an inflection point where the number of sub-baccalaureate program completions, such as certificates in demand-driven sectors like biomedical sciences, computer sciences, precision production, doubled across the region. It's possible that we could see similar patterns arise here as the economy recovers. And surveys by NEBI and Strata show that an interest in short-term training programs connected to employment is strong. So, as usual, our colleges and universities must display a degree of nimbleness to exceed efforts of prior decades. They'll need to respond to a greater array of students, including adult learners, who are likely to turn to these short-term online methods of gaining industry-validated knowledge and skills. At the same time, collaboration between post-secondary ed, employers, and local and state governments must turn a new page, mitigating the likelihood of a full-blown recession coming out stronger depends on prioritizing the acquisition of in-demand automation-resistant skills and credentials by our out-of-work individuals and at-risk incumbent workers that are connected to high-quality jobs. There are a number of factors at play alongside of the pandemic on our regional higher ed landscape and economy. For one, the age and demographics of the region call for new strategies to meet the fast-changing needs of our labor market and ensure that the region remains a top choice for people to live and work. With fewer high school graduates entering the college and career pipeline, it's important that we optimize existing human capital, on and underemployed adults, individuals traditionally underserved by higher education and workforce training, and recent immigrants. Connecticut is projected to experience one of the greatest declines in the number of high school graduates by 2032 in our region. The estimated decline is 21%. Across the region, higher education institutions, workforce training providers, and employers must work together to develop a new system of learning that meets individuals where they are and allows for the continuous upgrading of skills and knowledge. In doing so, we can bridge the gap between the supply and demand of adults with needed post-secondary credentials. In Connecticut, over 57% of adults have a post-secondary credential, while up to 78% of jobs require one. And by credential, we mean a short-term certificate, an associate's degree, a bachelor's or higher degree, as well as industry-recognized credentials like licenses. The share of folks with post-secondary credentials in Connecticut is above the national and regional average. When compared to another New England state, Massachusetts, people in Connecticut are slightly less likely to have a bachelor's degree as their highest level of education. Connecticut's economy is fairly diverse with a mix of industries that require specialized knowledge and skills. Relative to the rest of the country, Connecticut has a high share of jobs in the defense industry, no surprise to anyone here, and in private households. Yet many of the smaller industries, particularly specialized manufacturing, have been in decline somewhat. And we see occupations requiring post-secondary credentials growing quickly in Connecticut, particularly in healthcare. For example, in outpatient care, jobs are expected to grow by 39% by 2029, or 5,000 new job openings. And the average wage for these jobs meets the living wage threshold at over $70,000 per year. To make sure that Connecticut can respond to the changing mix of growing industries and available jobs, we need to increase access to and completion of post-secondary credentials for over 40,000 individuals, which is a figure that we will come back to. Those with a post-secondary credential are more likely to live in Fairfield and Middlesex counties, more affluent areas of the state, and Connecticut also sees significant attainment gaps based on race, over 30 percentage points between Hispanic and white residents. What's more, the attainment of Hispanic individuals is one of the lowest in the region at only 24%. Prior to the onset of COVID-19, 1 in 2 adults in Connecticut perceived the need to pursue additional education. The impact of COVID-19 on people's employment status is changing the way they're thinking about new education and training options. According to Strata, 56% of Americans have either lost their jobs or had their hours or income reduced. 1 in 3 believe that they will need more education to find a comparable job. For millennials and Generation X, this belief is most pronounced across the region, the nation too. This mirrors general trends that the perceived need for career advancing education in Connecticut. The demand is particularly strong among young adults who are responding to labor market demand. There's a bit of variation by attainment level as well, with the perceived need for additional education highest among those without a high school diploma. However, this perceived need among other attainment groups is much flatter than in other states, meaning it's widely held that additional education would be positive no matter the attainment level. Now, if you recall, we need 40,000 more Connecticut residents to complete a post-secondary credential. If we apply this survey data, one can count over 280,000 adults without any post-secondary education experience who perceive the need for additional career-connected education. Digging deeper allows us to confirm some additional hypotheses. As population growth among the white population slows, education and training opportunities should respond to the needs of Black and Hispanic individuals. 1 in 2 Black people in Connecticut see the need for additional education, and 3 in 5 Hispanic people do. Furthermore, individuals working in life sciences and healthcare are apt to see the need for more education and training. So, how do we respond? There's a lot of opportunity to set the conditions now to support Connecticut's employers and build upon the demand for career-connected education and training. At this stage of the global pandemic, many of the conditions linked to the recommendations made in this white paper exist. We know that given needed tools and resources, individuals can adapt quickly to digital methods of teaching, learning, and working. Current and prospective students' expectations of higher education is changing. Deficiencies in our labor market have been revealed, such that the need for transparent education and career pathways is newly clarified. And finally, we know that we can no longer ignore inequities faced by people of color and low-wage hourly workers. We believe that upskilling is a key strategy to meet the needs of current and future members of our workforce, our employers, and our higher education institutions. So with that, I will turn it over to Charlotte to discuss the findings of our white paper.
Great, thank you, Candace. So before I jump in, let's talk about what upskilling actually means. In the fewest words, to upskill is to gain additional or alternate skills that will translate to advancement in the workforce. The Aspen Institute's Upskill America initiative defines upskilling by 3 key opportunities and outcomes: employer training, credentials, and college degrees. Upskilling through employer training refers to employers providing or partnering with education institutions to provide retraining and upskilling opportunities for incumbent workers. Upskilling can also take place by way of attaining a credential of value or a verification of an individual's skill level or qualification by a third party, like a trade association. Lastly, an individual may upskill by attaining a college degree, ideally with the financial assistance of his or her employer. Upskilling is important across sectors. For workers, upskilling can directly translate to increased wages and or a promotion. For employers, upskilling is an important tool to enhancing work product and retaining workers, and it is also more cost-effective to upskill an incumbent worker than to recruit a new employee. Educators benefit from upskilling because by forming partnerships with employers, they not only assist their students in job placement, they also make themselves a more sustainable institution because through innovative program development and successful partnerships within industry, institutions widen their application pools. Policymakers play a crucial role in upskilling through creating policies supportive of the aforementioned entities and, most importantly, our labor force. But also by creating policies that support the creation and sustainability of upskilling programs, policymakers open educational opportunities to more citizens who in turn make greater contributions to the economy. The next question is, where should upskilling take place to be most effective? According to the Strata Consumer Insights data, New England adults are extremely likely to enroll in education and training through their employer. The next most desired source of education is community college, then four-year college. So if employers develop upskilling programs or partner with education providers to develop upskilling programs, workers are more likely to take advantage, acquire higher level skills, increase their wages, contribute more to their employer, increase output, become a better consumer, et cetera, et cetera. In September 2019, NEBI, with the support of Strata, convened a thinkers meeting. At the meeting were representatives from colleges and universities, employers both large and small, state policy, industry associations, workforce boards, and other stakeholders. Through robust discussion around best practices and opportunities in the upskilling space, we came up with 3 models for upskilling, which can, of course, be tailored to individual businesses and institutions of varying sizes. As we've emphasized, the implementation of these models is of increasing importance in our current circumstances. Partnerships between employers and education providers will be especially pertinent and are becoming especially pertinent as we are beginning to return to normalcy, whatever that will look like, and rebuild our economy. So the first model is in-house upskilling. This model works best for large employers with significant resources to dedicate education and training programs on site. Companies like Amazon and JetBlue have strong in-house upskilling programs. And a bit closer to home, Chimbro Institute in Maine is an exemplar of this model. Chimbro offers high school internships, safety development training, professional trade and craft skills development, apprenticeships, leadership, and professional development programs, and even more. All of these programs are, quote, tailored to invest in the long-term development and retention of talented, capable leaders at all levels of the company. The second model is a employer to institution partnership. Here, an employer seeks the partnership of an institution or vice versa to develop a curriculum or program which can be customized or already existing that directly correlates to the employer's skills gaps. The Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Massachusetts partnered with Bunker Hill Community College to do exactly this. This partnership, called the Employee Career Initiative, delivers free prerequisite courses for careers in allied health. Beth Israel develops these courses with Bunker Hill, who offers them on site, meaning workers do not have to leave the hospital in order to take their classes. This model can work well for mid-sized employers and community colleges that have the capacity to develop customized programming when necessary and or travel to deliver on-site programs. The third is an industry-led partnership where an intermediary, which can be a workforce board, an industry association, or the like, helps to connect employers and educators and build and sustain the partnership and subsequent upskilling programs. The Eastern Advanced Manufacturing Alliance, or EMA, is an excellent example of this. EMA is a collective of manufacturing businesses in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and has established itself as a nonprofit organization and intermediary for member organizations and partnered education providers. EMA reviews its community college partners' program offerings to ensure they align with current manufacturing industry needs. It advocates for supportive policies for the advanced manufacturing workforce pipeline, and it is a resource for best practices for employers and education providers. Since integrating employers into the educational pipeline is not a practice universally implemented by educational institutions right now, we've narrowed the role employers play into 4 concrete arenas. The first is to assess workforce skills gaps so that employers may accurately articulate openings for upskilled or upskilling employees. The second is to form partnerships through one of the models previously articulated. The third is to invest in or elevate existing high quality, effective upskilling programs. With this investment comes the responsibility to advertise upskilling opportunities to employees. We learned from the meeting we hosted in September that many employers who offer tuition benefits, for example, do not actually track who is using them, and much of the time, employees do not even know that this benefit exists for them. And on top of all that, tuition reimbursement as a benefit is not always the most helpful because it does not mitigate the upfront costs of college. So we have to rethink this more traditional benefit and elevate the more innovative models that we've touched on previously. So lastly is to standardize skills language. This will be most effective when developed in collaboration with education partners so that job skills and course outcomes are aligned in such a way that the pathway from an education and training program to a job is clear to the student, the institution, and the employer. We're now going to move into some recommendations for state policy solutions. In our white paper, we articulate 3 buckets of policy recommendations: delivery models, partnerships, and state policy. but for the purposes of this webinar, we're going to just focus on the state policy recommendations. It's important to note here that we created these recommendations with an equity lens, and in fact, we believe these recommendations actually facilitate increased equity and inclusion in upskilling programs. So the first policy recommendation is to implement policies that require validation of prior learning or expansion of validation of prior learning. By recognizing and documenting prior learning, whether through work experiences, military experience, or previous academic experience, education providers shorten time to in-demand credentials, which workers can achieve through upskilling programs. We're going to focus here on College Credit for Heroes, which is specifically for military veterans, but we believe this model can be translated and scaled well for non-military programs. College Credit for Heroes was initiated in 2011 and is intended to maximize awarded academic credit for military experience. CCH is built on two primary pillars: an extensive network of participating schools. It's currently at over 50 colleges and systems in Texas, and the development of accelerated curriculum. The Texas legislature allocated $5 million to launch the program in 2011, and it was made permanent in 2015 through SB 806. CCH has completed thousands of evaluations of military experience, which has resulted in an average of 25 college credits per veteran. Codification of this initiative has significantly increased participation of institutions, which has in turn increased student participation. The second policy recommendation is for policymakers to implement incentives for employers to prioritize upskilling as a key business strategy through state-issued grants or tax breaks. An example is the Massachusetts Workforce Training Fund, a program out of the Massachusetts Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development, to which organizations can apply for what they call general grants up to $250,000 that go towards training current and newly hired workers in topics like project management, software and IT skills, and machine setup and operation. This model works well because not only is it government supported, businesses must pay membership dues, and for-profit companies actually automatically pay into the fund, so there's widespread knowledge of this resource. We actually had a representative from Commonwealth Corporation that helps to administer this program in our Upskilling Massachusetts webinar, which is up on our website if you'd like to learn more about this. Our last policy recommendation is to develop accessible, transparent, and stackable credential pathway models so that all stakeholders can easily understand how upskilling programs translate to promotional structures and/or post-secondary credentials. In 2019, Vermont enacted H533, which requires the Department of Labor to collaborate with post-secondary education and training providers, government agencies, and employers to recruit adults into educational training programs, locate funding subsidies for participants, and map pathways from high-value credential programs to high-quality job outcomes. So that concludes our data rundown and overview of our white paper. And now we will turn it over to Vicki Bizzuto to talk a little bit about how CSCU is operating in this upskilling space.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This particular report is absolutely what we've used for the Connecticut State Community College's creation and are using the goals and recommendations. We are addressing the changing expectations of higher ed, and currently the faculty of 12 community colleges are aligning their programs for final implementation in 2023. These aligned programs are designed to meet employer expectations and the changing workplace demands. The Board of Regents has approved the areas of study that will structurally support these aligned academic programs. This change will enable Connecticut residents to access course and programs offerings more readily, which will provide career and transfer opportunities that may never have been offered at the local community college in the past. In support of addressing equity gaps, the system has partnered with Achieving the Dream to help our institutions understand how programs and services can be organized and delivered to reduce the racial, ethnic, and gender disparities in degree and credential attainment. What we've done is develop 23 key performance indicators to substantiate the program and service changes that would be necessary to improve retention and completion rates. The Connecticut State Community College's proposed organizational structure promotes fiscal sustainability. An example of the savings can be seen in the consolidation of non-student facing operational functions such as HR, finance, and purchasing. And also as part of the Students First initiative, the Board of Regents has approved the implementation of guided pathways, starting with the student's end goal in mind, focusing on providing students with clear maps and improving the student experience will close equity gaps. All of it which will help students complete credentials, transfer, and attain jobs of value in the labor market. Finally, our CSCU leadership has served on the Governor's Workforce Council, and they expect there will be significant intersection between the Governor's plan and the system's focus on workforce development and regional sector partnerships. As you know, during COVID-19, we've had to change how we do business. We've offered a significantly greater number of courses online, but we're trying to accommodate the lab classes and clinical on site. And in certain courses, we may have had to add additional sections because of the seat count reduction. But kudos to our faculty and staff. They've reimagined the in-person experience to assure distancing as well as the cleaning practices that provide a safe learning environment. The colleges and the universities have expanded their remote student support services to assure students have a successful transition to a fully online platform. They may schedule or drop in to open online support sessions, and every effort has been made to assure that those students who have technology needs have been awarded computers as well as hotspots. In addition, we've been able to partner with the WIBs and have been able to access CARE funding to support upskilling in manufacturing. Next slide, please. So what are those continued efforts? We've been demonstrating significant success with manufacturing programs that meet employer expectations. The system receives federal and state grants, enabling expansions to 9 advanced manufacturing centers. Most recently, Tunxus Community College and the College of Technology were approved for a 44,000 square foot manufacturing center attached to the campus. These exciting ventures are grounded in successful public-private partnerships. They include stakeholders from across industry, government, and education. Technical and comprehensive high schools, the College of Technology, Goodwin College, and 9 other private colleges and universities, as well as the workforce boards and manufacturing associations. These collaborative relationships assure that the credentials are recommended by the employers and are applied toward a stackable industry-recognized certificate and degree. These flexible programs are offered online, on ground, at the college or at the work site, and are often designed with the employer, the workforce boards, and community intermediaries. They allow the participants the best prospect of completion and employment. The WIBs may provide employer and participant incentives and assist with recruitment, pre-screening assessment, and employment readiness supports, whereas the community partners may provide resources to remove obstacles for non-traditional students and those workers who are upskilling to meet their employers' changing workforce expectations. Currently, 4 of our community colleges serve over 350 students in a robust Second Chance Pell program. Due to COVID, they were temporarily suspended, but we expect that they will be back on track this spring if everything moves forward. And you've mentioned, we have the Eastern Connecticut Manufacturing Pipeline. It's an example of successful collaborative workforce development initiatives where Quinebaug Valley and Three Rivers are training skilled workers for electric boat. Gateway Community College in Middlesex made minimal modifications to the EWIBS pipeline to meet the skill needs of the manufacturers in the Workforce Alliance's service region. And then as Nantucket Community College with Pratt & Whitney They've delivered a pipeline program, but in addition to that, they are also responsible for training all of Pratt & Whitney's new employees for their orientations. Nursing. Connecticut has had a very strong statewide public nursing program for a long time, which now includes 6 community colleges which offer associate degrees, 3 state universities offering bachelor's and master's programs, and 2 of those colleges provide doctoral programs as well. The statewide nursing deans and directors meet regularly, and their long-standing collaboration has resulted in a seamless pathway for community college nursing students to matriculate into a baccalaureate program at one of our public and/or private colleges. Their advisory boards are critical to continuing the currency of their curriculum, and they assure that our program's graduates will meet the healthcare employers' entry-level requirements. In addition, the clinical training is still continuing and is supported by the hospitals and the long-term care facilities, and their credentialed employees participate as clinical preceptors, guest lecturers, and adjunct professors. As you can see, the changes we've incorporated support the report's recommendations and will provide Connecticut's employers with a skilled workforce for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vicki. We will now turn it over to Mark Scheinberg, president of Goodwin University, to talk about upskilling at Goodwin.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, and also thank you, Candace, for the great the information on the report. A couple of things I just wanted to react to really quickly before I got to the things that we're doing, and that has to do with Candace's discussion about the demographics and what we're facing as a region and certainly as a state. Because of the demographics, it's obvious that we're going to be doing a lot more retraining than we are traditional training for people out of high school. And with the demographics being what they show, it's also a situation where we're going to be dealing a lot more with students, as she said, that aren't as availed of higher education as they have been in the past. We're going to deal a lot more with minority students and actually mid-career kinds of students. And so that calls into some questions about the system as well, which I know I've mentioned before, which is that in order to do that, you have to create as much access as possible. The community colleges are certainly an access point for many of these students, but you have to also keep in mind that a lot of the testing that goes into getting into many of our schools are themselves, racially biased. They are. We know that people get poor SAT scores, and so if an SAT is required, that student who you're trying to serve is going to have less of a chance of getting into a traditional university. I know for us, as many universities, we've used an AccuPlacer score to put people into actual classes once they've applied to school to assess where they are. But even that, we found, has a lot of English bias to it, so that we were putting an awful lot more people probably than necessary into remedial coursework than even into the hands-on training that this report requires. And we stopped using an AccuPlacer a couple of years ago and started to embed students, even in our own magnet high schools, into classes themselves. And what we found was that there was an incredible increase in the number of people that are able to avail themselves and use college training that we had never given an opportunity to because we were taking so much reliance on this. And when you saw the statistic about how many people are looking to access education and it being so much higher among Hispanics and African American residents, all the more reason to try to make sure that we smooth the path for those people to get back into school. Also wanted to mention in terms of just a point about COVID as we're looking at this going forward. In the Hartford region where we have our own statistics, 64% of those people that lost jobs due to COVID were making under $35,000 a year. So while we talk about the Great Recession as in comparison to what we're doing now, what was different about COVID is that it is affecting much more our lowest income wage earners to begin with. And so the people that we are going to have to serve at pace are not people who are going to be very good, especially at navigating the difficulties in getting back to school and how to succeed in that once it exists, which calls into question the incredible need we have right now of all of our support services and our support service agencies, which themselves have been decimated by the economy and by COVID. So many of the supports that need to be in place for the populations that we most need to serve are being the most highly affected by the moment. And so, so maybe that's a commentary beforehand. And then what are we doing in terms of upskilling? Goodwin is an unusual university in that we are very heavily based around jobs and careers and creating that linkage between residents and the employers in our area. And it was interesting that the report breaks them out into in-house upscaling and direct employer partnerships and industry-led partnerships, because in one way or another, Goodwin is doing all three. In terms of in-house upscaling, we actually have a manufacturing mobile laboratory, which is a tractor trailer which has been converted with Wi-Fi and air conditioning and everything else you can have in there. So we could actually take an entire manufacturing classroom, move it into there, and actually take it to employers. So instead of employers having to find ways of getting employees into our higher education locations, it allows them to do it right on site. And that's important because for an employer, the cost of taking someone offline and taking them to another location is itself sometimes as expensive as the training itself. So by putting things on the mobile manufacturing lab, that has been incredibly helpful and allows us to have those tentacles out all over the state. In terms of direct employer institution partnerships, there are so many places to go with this. I know the community colleges have been brilliant at it. We have also been working with many of our industries in very real time. And just to name a few, we have programs that in partnership in a number of different ways. The first thing I wanted to point out is that most of our programs, or at least many of them, are also approved as apprenticeship sites or apprenticeship training. So that would be common in areas of manufacturing, and that's perhaps one place where you'd expect it. But we're also putting that into places in healthcare and others, so that it means that a student can start their education here in a shorter term program, can find a job within industry, and then that industry partner is able to get tax benefits as well as additional funding for training, so the student can then come back to school, get upgraded while they're on the site, and have that not be an additional expense necessarily to the actual employer. We also have some interesting partnerships where students that are in some of our highest areas of need can come to us for a semester, get their first certifications, especially in different manufacturing areas, and then can be hired directly into industry right at that point. Examples of that is not just the typical CNC and manufacturing areas, but we have that happening in welding, and we have a great relationship with RGBSI, which is a mechatronics site. That is for people who are doing the mechanics of robotics. So people who are actually working on the robots that work for the corporations. And so in all those cases, they'll come to us for the first short-term training, then go to the industry. The industry releases them for the time they have to go back to class, but they're already working full-time at industry wages then within 8 weeks of walking in the door the first time. And that works out incredibly well. We have a number of industry-led partnerships in close relationship with our capital workforce partners in the Hartford region. We do also one with Pratt & Whitney, where they oftentimes bring in higher level engineers into their headquarters, but those engineers have never been on a shop floor. So what's interesting is, although they may have a higher degree, they don't know the mechanics of how what they're writing actually translates to on a shop floor. So getting that sort of knowledge cross-trains them so they're much more effective on the job. We have, in the last couple of months, we're part of a $2 million manufacturing and apprenticeship grant through the U.S. Department of Labor. And we partner with community colleges on that so we can take over 400 incumbent workers a year and train them to emphasize and build up the pipeline of talent so those workers can go to higher levels of training to in turn open up their positions so that new entry-level workers will also be able to find work. We have a group of called eCamp, which is an apprenticeship initiative that deals a lot with people returning out of prison and also with high school students so that they're able to create their apprenticeship hours and get placed seamlessly into that pathway into jobs. And we're using a lot of the Skills 180 training programs, which is about 120 hours of very short-term training that the Department of Labor is offering, but it also then provides entry college credit, to your point about giving credit for earlier learning, so that not only will they find that job, but they will have some credits towards a degree, which in turn encourages people to be thinking about going back to school. And as much as we can create building block curricula so that everything that you're doing then creates another puzzle piece to a full degree and a full pathway, you constantly, instead of creating gates between those activities, you're creating a pathway so that students will continue to upgrade themselves and will become better and better workers over their career. And finally, we do a lot with the Workforce Training Innovation Funds, where we're doing a bookkeeping program, we're doing an industrial automation technician program. And again, they're all short-term programs that are usually 3-month certificates, which link, again, seamlessly into not only our 2- and 4-year degrees, but also into our graduate degrees, so that people, again, are made, have their pathway made as simple for them as is possible. The only other things I'd mention that I'd add to this is that there's some points of learning in this for those of us that are in the field. The first thing I find is that even in this environment, if you're waiting to get the grant first to do some of this learning, you're probably going to get behind the curve. And so it's important for all of us in higher education to sort of do the work first, to try things out, to test systems to see that they work. So as money comes in, we're often ready to go. I think that worked for us all when COVID came in, because many of the things we had to put into place, we had already attempted and had some success at beforehand. And so that becomes critical. Second thing is that, we're academicians. And so we tend to spend an awful lot of time, stewing in our own juices. I know Vicki is great at being out into so many of the industries in our area. It's so critical that you have to do the work that industry is asking you to do, rather than doing all the work and hoping industry likes what you're doing. And so that reactionary mode for higher education is something that is not entirely comfortable in all cases, but the future of our industry, it depends upon us being able and willing to do what the recipient organizations need from us, rather than those things that we tend to bake ourselves. And finally, it is so critical to keep the linkages with industry vital. It's especially critical, we have found, during this entire COVID crisis, because everybody has been fractured. All of our systems have been fractured to one extent or another. And those linkages, those person-to-person relationships that you have with industry, that sense that you are there for them and in their service, is really critical, so that as you need them now, as you're trying to find homes for your students, that those people are very much aware of what your intentions are and aware that you were there for them beforehand, and you'll be there for them even when this crisis passes. So those are my insights to offer to you. I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Mark. We are going to zoom in even further, and Jennifer is going to talk to us about Trinity College's partnership with Infosys.
Great, thanks, Charlotte. I'll just share my screen. There we go. So I'm going to talk briefly about upskilling in a liberal arts college, why it matters, what it means, and how Trinity is really taking the lead in this. What we're doing is quite unusual for a liberal arts college. My name is Jennifer Regan-Lefebvre. I'm the Faculty Director of Innovation Initiatives, which encompasses a wide range of programs, including our Infosys collaboration. I'm also an Associate Professor of History. So when I'm not doing this, I'm teaching British history in the normal classroom. So what's a liberal arts education? It's broad-based learning across arts, humanities, social sciences, and sciences. It emphasizes analysis and communication, and it takes things at a theoretical level. Generally, our students have a general education, and then they choose to take on a major. It's not rote learning. It's not just knowledge acquisition. It's not strictly vocational, and it's not limited to one particular area of study. So you might think that the liberal arts college is an unusual kind of institution to highlight when you're talking about increased vocational training and closing that skills gap. Trinity also seems probably unlikely case study here because we are a relatively affluent and privileged institution. We have just over 2,000 undergraduates. Mostly in our undergraduate program, we have 91 graduate students, so very small graduate programs. We are increasingly a choice destination for students with Pell Grants and for students of color, and that's deliberate because we worked really hard on that. And we have a broad range of majors, but none of them are vocational. In fact, upskilling really needs to happen at every level of education. And just to give you a kind of wacky example, you can upskill the PhD. What do I mean by that? Well, many places have realized that people with PhDs don't actually have meaningful workforce skills, or if they do, they're not aware of what they are. Excuse me. The United Kingdom, where I did my PhD, actually created this research development framework to identify skills in PhDs and created an extensive training program that all PhD students across the country are required to take to ensure that they have valuable workplace skills. And I pity the civil servant who had to create this beautiful infographic. You could also look at the alt-ac movement in the United States, which has spurred this huge industry of consultants helping people to translate their PhDs into something that's usable, something that's hireable. So this is happening at every level. Where does the liberal arts college come in? For years, Trinity has been doing a great job leveraging the liberal arts. In other words, helping our students to understand how the skills they learn in our classroom are transferable to the workforce, and creating special programming that enhances what they learn in the classroom with experiential learning. So for example, we've had a variety of gateway programs aimed at first-year students. The Global Health Humanities, for example, involves study abroad in Trinidad and work with healthcare organizations in the Hartford area. We have a liberal arts action lab downtown where students partner with local nonprofits to undertake social science research, create policy suggestions and presentations. We also have a public humanities collaborative, which is funded by a Mellon grant, which gets students working with nonprofits and cultural organizations in the summer. This summer, I supervised 4 students to work with a local history museum. So we've done a lot of things to enhance students' skills along the way and to make them more conscious and able to speak about how to use those skills when it comes to applying for jobs. So if you think, oh, an elite liberal arts college, they don't have to worry about upskilling. This is really an issue for community colleges. This is an issue for the state sector. It's not at all. At every level of higher education, we need to think about upskilling and getting students to understand how what they're doing in the classroom is going to translate into employment. And so the biggest venture we've had in this regard is a direct employer institution partnership, which is the Applied Learning Initiative, which Trinity launched with Infosys in 2018. And on the right of my screen, you should see the badge that we give through Credly, which students can show on LinkedIn when they've completed one part of it. So we offer a recognizable credential that students can use in marketing and branding themselves. A little background to this partnership. Infosys is a massive global tech company. It was established in 1981 and it's based in India. It has almost 250,000 employees worldwide and its Hartford hub opened just 2 years ago. they expect, or at least they projected before COVID, that they would have 1,000 Hartford employees by 2023. And they're in the beautiful Goodwin building next to the Goodwin Hotel downtown. But what's really special about this partnership, and I'm sure you, looking at this photo, those of you in Connecticut will recognize our current and former governor, the mayor of Hartford, and also Ravi Kumar, the president of Infosys, and the lady on the right, Professor Joanne Berger-Sweeney, a renowned neuroscientist and the president of Trinity College. Joanne managed to convince Ravi that the liberal arts is what Infosys actually needs to continue to thrive as a business. So what we've done at Trinity is we've actually flipped what Mark just said. Mark, I was really struck by what you said, that we have to be in reactionary mode and thinking about what industry needs from us in higher education. What Ravi Kumar has said is really, I need the liberal arts to tell me what I need, what my company needs, because he recognizes that there are skills that liberal arts graduates have that makes them not just problem solvers, but problem finders. And so he was looking for people who could have the training of a liberal arts degree that will help them to go further in business. And he also wanted our help in training his own employees. And so what we created is a program which is business analysis for digital transformation, in which we actually do job training for new business analysts at Infosys who come to Trinity. At the moment, they're coming virtually, but it's still very much a Trinity program. For 5 weeks, they learn fundamentals of business analysis and design thinking. Both of those are taught by consultants who Trinity has hired, who are specialists in these areas. They have strong academic backgrounds themselves. And they also take core liberal arts modules to improve their communication, their leadership, and their critical thinking skills. They follow that up with 3 weeks at Infosys, where they actually get into the nitty-gritty on the computers and look at some of the tech issues, for a total of 8 weeks of on-the-job training. The feedback from this program has been phenomenal. We have had about 250 people go through it now in 10 different cohorts, and it is a dynamic and robust program that makes them think. We attract an incredibly diverse cohort each time, and that's something we're really proud of as well. We have a number of other projects, some of which are tied specifically to this partnership and some of which fall into our broader innovation framework. Internships, that photo on the right, is a group of Trinity students who actually had internships at Infosys in Bangalore in India 2 summers ago, where they had intensive on-the-job training in various aspects of the company, not just traditional tech roles, but also in marketing, in communications, in research and design. We also have a program that we created this summer called Tech Edge, which is for undergraduates, and you can see the little badge on the right, which teaches undergraduates to bridge their liberal arts education into the world of business and tech. It gives them real life problem solving, and it features speakers both from our own computer science program, from our alumni community, and also from Infosys. We've been active in a medtech accelerator in downtown Hartford, and we believe that in the longer term, that's going to yield many more internships and opportunities for our students, as well as partnerships for our faculty. And I'm actually in the process right now of relaunching our Academy of Lifelong Learning, which used to largely focus on the local retiree community, and is going to expand to really reach out to our alums to offer some continuing professional development and learning taught by our faculty members. So I know we don't have much time. I want to leave some time for questions, so I'll leave it there. But we've got a lot going on, and I'd love to hear from you about your ideas and questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I think it is important to note that Jennifer not only teaches British history, she teaches history of the wine trade. So that is a must research.
And that's a free online course. I should have mentioned that. We offer a collaboration with edX. So if you go to edX.org, you can find World Histories of Modern Wine taught by me.
Well, I will be doing that as soon as I log off. Candace, I'll need the rest of the day off. So we have, I'll start off the questions. We only have a couple of minutes, so we might only get through a couple. For our listeners, please do feel free to pop any questions you have in that little Q&A tab on your screen. But one question I have, Vicki, I'll start with you here. what is the next program or policy you would like to see coming from the state level that could expand or help to scale upskilling programs in Connecticut?
Well, I think what we really need to do is take a deeper look at the non-credit coursework that we're offering across the state and work with employers and faculty to see what the credit value for those might be and where they see opportunities for us to create short-term certificates that will move along to the credit side of the house. That's probably where I think we can provide the most service for employers as well as the residents of Connecticut.
Jennifer or Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
Just something really briefly. I'm totally with you, Vicki. It's amazing to me, and I've talked to academic, groups, that if you talk about taking some of the good work that's done in continuing education and make it a credit bearing, you sometimes do get a reaction that it is not really academic enough. It doesn't have that, there's pushback on it because it's not traditional. At the same time, I always push back at them that you could have someone take a 5-month program with a CBO and get through it all and get no credit for it and no credit awarded. But these are the same schools that if you had the 1-week Costa Rica trip, they'll kick out 3 credits for that as well. And it's not that they're not learning a ton during Costa Rica. The idea is that you're not going to water down your degree by having someone have an experience that's different than what is traditional. And so you have to just be more open-minded about what that means. And if you give that credit to someone, you've just told them that you can handle something at the college level. Please come back and do more. And so all the people that are touched by the community colleges and continuing education, they could all be really good students if they just encouraged to be so.
Sure, just to add to that, Trinity is going to be bringing in a new curriculum over the next few years. We've already voted on it. And it's going to distinguish amongst different types of credit, sort of normal academic credit, and then co-curricular activities as well. So there's credit and there's credit. There are different ways to look at this to ensure that you don't water down the core of your academic mission, but that you also recognize that these life experiences have something to add as well. In response to your first question, I'm not in the policy arena myself, but I was really excited by the legislation that Senator Will Haskell passed to allow students, sort of incentivize companies to help students with their student loans. So you hire people and you assist them with their student loans. Perhaps we could see something incentivizing professional development credit and financing for that. That would help more students to continue developing their skills in the workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to wrap up in our last 2 minutes, Mark, what would you say, I'll pass this to all of you, I'll start with Mark. What would you say is the biggest hurdle or most important first step, we'll say, to initiating upskilling programs at the institutional level?
For many schools, I think that a lot of it is just getting out of our own way. It is, there is so much going on. What you're calling upscaling is actually pretty technically sophisticated, the kinds of things that people are learning. The fact that they're learning in a real world environment makes it only stronger. So I think that in many ways it is perhaps those of us that are in the field getting really comfortable with the fact that there's really, really important, strong learning that needs to be embraced and celebrated. So I think it may be some things that are just internal that way.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add here, Jennifer?
I would say get your faculty involved from the get-go. It's easy to see faculty members as a potential stumbling block, and it's common for faculty members to dig their heels in and say, what's this about? Get them involved from the beginning. Faculty members have incredible skills, get their ideas, get their suggestions, and encourage them, run small grant programs that allow them to meet in groups and to brainstorm how they could create new programming themselves. Make sure they're a part of this and get them excited about it.
And I'd probably also add that the key for that is to make sure that the faculty are talking directly to the employers so that they have a real understanding of what their expectations are, so that when they are building the curriculum, that they are responding to the competencies that they're going to be expecting on the front line.
Mm-hmm. We are at 2 o'clock, and we would like to thank all of you so very much for joining us this afternoon, and thank you to all of our listeners as well. Please visit our website if you want to explore our upskilling webinars from our other states in the region. And stay tuned. The next couple of weeks, we will be traveling up to New Hampshire virtually to talk about upskilling there. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to Candace or I or our lovely panelists. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.